In today's video, we're going to be discussing the fascinating connection with inflammation and depression, and how inflammation is actually one of the main drivers of depression and mental health symptoms. We're going to explore how inflammation affects your brain, how it can show up in various parts of your body, and what you can do to manage and reduce inflammation to support your mental health. So stay tuned. So let's start by understanding inflammation. So what is inflammation? Well, we actually have acute inflammation and chronic inflammation. Acute inflammation is like when you have an injury, you sprain your ankle and it swells up. That's the inflammatory process going in there, protecting that ankle so that healing can take place. And acute inflammation is actually very good for us and is a part of our survival, our immune response, and general healing. Chronic inflammation, on the other hand, is where the immune system keeps producing this inflammatory response that is activated in the body without really a clear cause. And this persistent chronic inflammation can actually lead to various health diseases, including mental health symptoms like depression. And markers of inflammation that you can actually look at in your lab tests, and I would recommend that you request these tests, are the following: C-reactive protein or CRP, cytokines, and particularly interleukin 6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha or TNF alpha have often been involved in the inflammatory process and linked to depression and mental health symptoms. IgG markers, and specifically IgG markers related to food sensitivities. The omega-3 index, because having a low omega-3 index or a low intake of omega-3s increases your risk of inflammation and increases your risk of depression, because omega-3s are very protective for the brain and are necessary for the brain to function properly. You also want to look at your ANA or the autoimmune antibodies ANA and do an autoimmune analyzer, because this will rule out autoimmune conditions which can lead to chronic inflammation. Fasting insulin and cortisol are also important markers of inflammation, because when you have a high fasting insulin level and high cortisol response, that indicates that your body is chronically under stress and chronically producing cortisol, which in the long term leads to increased inflammation and incidences of depression and mental health symptoms. So now let's talk about how inflammation affects the brain. So inflammation affects the brain in various ways. Neurogenesis disruption is one of them. And what this means is that the chronic inflammation can actually inhibit our brain from producing brain-derived neurotrophic factor and creating new cells, making new neural connections. And when it does that, our brain's ability to process new information, retain memory, and help with our mood regulation, especially in areas of like the hippocampus, is greatly reduced. And that can actually lead to symptoms of depression. Neurotransmitter imbalances can often occur due to chronic inflammation in the brain. And this is due to those inflammatory cytokines, because those inflammatory cytokines can actually disrupt and interfere with serotonin and dopamine synthesis and production. There are also brain structure changes that occur with inflammation, because chronic inflammation has been shown to decrease various brain regions like the hippocampus and amygdala, which are involved with our mood and regulating emotions. So the reduction in those areas can actually impair our emotional processing and regulation abilities. Chronic brain inflammation also leads to disruptive stress response. So this chronic inflammation can actually lead to overactivation of our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis or HPA axis. And this in turn results to those elevated cortisol levels, which is why it's important to have those cortisol levels checked, because this stress hormone can actually exacerbate inflammation even more, creating this domino effect and this cycle of chronic inflammation and stress in the body that can actually be contributing to your depressive symptoms. And so symptoms of depression that have been linked to inflammation are the following: persistent sadness or emptiness, loss of interest in activities that you once enjoyed, fatigue and low energy, difficulty concentrating and memory problems, as well as changes in appetite and even changes in your sleep pattern. So now let's talk about inflammation beyond the brain and how that can also impact our mental health functions and perhaps even lead to depression. So gut inflammation and depression, we've talked about in the past about this gut-brain connection, and I have a video on that specifically, and if you want a refresher, go ahead and check that out. But there is this link between the gut and the brain, and they're connected through the gut-brain axis and primarily the vagus nerve. And when there's inflammation in the gut, this can directly affect brain function and mood because it actually causes a dysregulation of our nervous system and stimulates that HPA axis. Gut microbiome dysbiosis, or the microbiota dysbiosis or overgrowth of the bad bacteria in our gut, can actually lead to intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And this actually allows inflammatory substances like lipopolysaccharide or LPS to get into our bloodstream and affect our brain, because LPS can cross the blood-brain barrier and is neurotoxic. There's also skin inflammation and the connection between skin inflammation and depression, which we talked about in depth in the interview that I did with Karan Krishnan. So if you missed that video, I advise that you check it out because there is a wealth of information during that live interview. But in summary, conditions like eczema, psoriasis, that are linked to chronic inflammation have been associated with depression. There's also an immune system connection when it comes to your skin. Your skin is your largest organ and it is our protective organ. And skin inflammation can actually be reflecting systemic inflammation inside of our bodies, which can also impact our mental health. So oftentimes skin reactions are a warning sign letting us know that our immune system is overactive and there is a lot of inflammation going on inside of our body. So lastly, let's talk about how we're going to manage inflammation to improve depression symptoms. Well, first of all, we have to reduce inflammation. And we can reduce inflammation by several ways. Number one is diet. So you want to adopt an anti-inflammatory diet, which means focusing on foods like fruits and vegetables, fatty fish, nuts and seeds, and avoid processed foods. Avoid the standard American diet. You want to avoid excess sugar and those trans fats or vegetable oils or hydrogenated oils. They are all going to induce inflammation. You also want to exercise more regularly. I have already discussed in another video in depth how exercise actually treats depression. And one of those factors is that exercise can actually significantly reduce inflammation and improve your mood. And when we're talking about exercise for treating depression, we want to aim for moderate exercise. So things like brisk walking or riding your bike have been shown to be beneficial. You can then step it up to higher intensity exercises, but do that more in a high intensity interval training instead of consistent high intensity. Especially in the beginning stages of treating your depression with exercise, you may be in that overactive fight or flight. So start slow, get up to moderate exercise, and if you want a little more intensity once you're feeling better, you can increase that to a high intensity interval training type exercise. You also want to work on stress management. Practicing stress reduction techniques like mindfulness, meditations, which I talked about in a separate video, and even deep breathing exercises and stimulating the vagus nerve can reduce stress. And when you reduce stress, you're going to reduce that fight or flight mechanism, you're going to reduce cortisol and in turn reduce inflammation. You also want to ensure you're getting enough sleep. And I've also made a video, of course, about sleep and sleep hygiene and how you can utilize that to get better sleep. So make sure you check that out. But when you ensure you're getting a good night's sleep every night, you're actually supporting your immune system and also supporting the detox processes that occur while you're sleeping. Good sleep leads to good restoration, a balanced brain and body, and allows you the ability to wake up refreshed the next day, ready to take on whatever challenges the next day holds. However, when you have poor sleep, you have increased inflammation, and now you're going to wake up grumpy, feeling tired, fatigued, and have poor mood regulation and perhaps even more mood swings and irritability. That can lead to depression. The next thing you want to do to manage this inflammation and help to reduce it is support the gut microbiome. So we just talked about the gut-brain axis, and if you want to watch that video on the gut-brain connection, that'll give you more details. But it's very important to support the gut microbiome, and you can do this with prebiotics and probiotics. So prebiotics are things that feed the gut bacteria, and probiotics are organisms that you ingest that help to create a symbiotic relationship in the gut and help to lower the bad bacteria. So you want to incorporate rich probiotic foods like yogurt and kefir, even though they're not necessarily considered probiotics because the organisms are not alive. They actually help with producing short-chain fatty acids in the gut, which can actually help lower inflammation. Prebiotic foods are fiber-rich foods like vegetables and fruits, and these can help promote a healthy gut microbiome. If you're going to be looking at taking supplements to support your microbiome, make sure that you're taking a supplement that has been researched with all of the ingredients being researched together, like Megaspore probiotic. That is my favorite probiotic and the probiotic that I like to use. Also, eating a balanced diet helps to support the gut microbiome, and if you can eat a variety of fruits and vegetables and try to eat like 30 different fruits and vegetables for the week, that can actually help improve your gut microbiome by giving it that diversity. So doing that can be very beneficial for supporting the gut microbiome and lowering inflammation. And then last but not least, you want to support the skin microbiome. You want to use gentle skincare with very few ingredients. You want to make sure that those ingredients are natural, that there aren't any fragrances or dyes or artificial chemicals in there that can create an inflammatory response in our body. And also make sure you stay hydrated. Hydration is very important for our immune system and of course our skin, improving the texture and tone of our skin barrier, but also very important for helping to flush out any toxins that may have accumulated just because we live in a very toxic world. So it's important to make sure you're staying hydrated, and this can look like anywhere from 64 ounces a day, or if you want to do the calculation of dividing your weight in pounds in half, that's how many ounces you should be drinking. But you want to get up to that, and if you're at a higher weight, discuss it with your doctor so you don't go into overhydration, and make sure that you're able to tolerate the extra water consumption. So in summary, chronic inflammation plays a very significant and important role in mental health and has been linked to depression. But there are many things that we can do to help lower our inflammatory burden that we just discussed in today's video, such as supporting your gut-brain axis, supporting your nutrition, eating a balanced anti-inflammatory diet, getting rid of processed foods, supporting your stress response, improving your stress response, and many other factors to bolster resilience. And these are the skills that can help you to overcome depression and other mental health symptoms. If you can focus on improving your lifestyle, make it more of a healthy lifestyle, and focus on these things to help decrease inflammation, your mental health symptoms will improve and you'll experience mental well-being. And that is the goal for all of us. And that is what I like to teach my clients when it comes to using skills before pills. Make sure that you're ruling out all of these underlying potential conditions, such as inflammation, that can be contributing to your mental health symptoms. So that wraps up my video for today. I hope you found it useful. Do you have any experience with increased inflammation and depression, or have any questions about this topic? Well, go ahead and drop it down in the comment section below, because we learn from sharing each other's experiences. And as always, I thank you for watching. I wish you well on your mental health care journey, and I'll look forward to seeing you all next week.